Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome back. In Module 4, we will talk about waste collection planning for urban areas, and in Lecture 21, we will talk about primary and secondary waste collection, and this is the part 1 of this particular lecture. So, the different concepts that we will cover in this particular lecture are on primary and secondary collection, waste collection system for individual generators, waste collection criteria, management information system for waste collection and transportation, and finally waste collection, transportation and disposal for different waste streams in an urban area. So, there are actually, even though we have talked about primary and secondary collection, actually there are 3 stages of collection that is possible for municipal solid waste transportation as well as collection and transportation. That is primary collection, secondary collection and tertiary collection. Now, the primary collection refers to removal of any kind of waste, either segregated or unsegregated, from the sources. The sources could be either the households, the sources could be some restaurants, sources could be some institution, or any kind of sources or generators has to be considered. So, removal of waste from those sources and transferring it to a storage depot, or it could be a transfer station, or it could be a disposal site, or it could be a waste processing center. So, that means after I collect the waste from suppose a household, then I can directly take it to a waste processing center, or I can directly take it to a disposal site, or I could take it to a transfer station from where the waste is loaded into larger lorries and then taken to the disposal site, or we can take it to a storage depot where the waste remains stored for some time and then it is collected from there and then taken to a waste processing center or a disposal site, or to a transfer station from where subsequently again the waste is transferred to a disposal site or a waste processing center. So, that means that primary collection is when we are initiating the collection of waste, that is from the source of generation to the next stage, whichever it is. Now, how the system would be designed, like should I go take the waste directly to a storage depot, or should I take it to a transfer station or to the final disposal site? It depends on the size of the city. That means if the city is very large, of course the waste collection happens in different stages. But if the city is small, then in that case the waste which is collected from a neighborhood is directly transported to even the landfill site. So, it also depends on the waste management system. That is, when we talk about waste management system, we have earlier learned that the waste that is collected in a municipal area is segregated into different types of waste, and also based on the different kinds of generators, we can segment the total waste that is being generated into different waste streams. Now, what are these waste streams? Waste streams may include waste coming from market, waste coming from bulk generators, waste coming from households. So, these are the different waste streams, and each of these waste streams, based on the rules that are or the bylaws of that particular municipal body, people have to do certain amount of segregation of this waste, and that segregation also plays a role, or this what kind of segregation is adopted in that particular urban area, that plays a role in what kind of primary collection system that we will decide. The next comes the secondary collection system. Now, once the waste is taken to a storage depot, or if the collection system is like a community bin, like instead of door-to-door collection, we have a system like some areas of the city where door-to-door collection is not possible, or for example, a very hilly area and also a dense settlement in a hilly area. The roads are too narrow for any kind of vehicle, even a handcart, to move inside. So, in that case, the generators have to bring their waste outside that particular area and store it in maybe a community bin, and from there we will collect the waste. Or take for example a slum area, right? So, here the density is very high and the roads are very narrow. So for people to, when they throw away their garbage, they cannot throw it directly to, they cannot transfer the garbage directly to a waste collector. So they have to bring it to a community bin from where the waste is eventually collected. So removal of waste from this kind of community bins, or the waste that is brought to waste storage depot via the primary collection system, these two kinds of waste can be now collected from this storage areas and then finally transported to either a waste processing center or a disposal site, or an intermediate transfer station from where the waste is further consolidated and then eventually transferred to a waste processing or a disposal site. So this is the secondary collection system. Now, secondary collection also requires the waste to be stored for some amount of time. That means this is known as secondary storage. And secondary storage also needs to have the capacity so that waste remains segregated. So somebody is segregating the waste at the household level. Now when you bring it to the community storage or you bring it to this waste storage depot, in that case the waste needs to be again stored in the same way. So similarly, we use separate covered bins over here, and segregated waste is stored in different bins or different containers. And as per the types of segregation that this particular urban body encourages or has made mandatory, accordingly we will do the segregation. Now, it also depends on the frequency of collection. That means the secondary storage, the size of the storage, we have already discussed this earlier in our previous lecture, that the size of the storage is decided based on the area from where the waste is collected, the quantity of waste generated by that particular area, the kind of segregation they practice, and finally the frequency of collection. Why it is important? Because if I collect the waste every day, then the quantity of waste that needs to be stored is definitely less than if I collect every 2 days or every 3 days, right? But usually in our weather conditions, we need to collect the waste daily. Otherwise, particularly organic waste, at least we need to collect daily. Otherwise, the waste should start decomposing and it will create very unsanitary or unhealthy conditions. So, either it has to be daily, but in some cases, in certain kinds of waste, we can also consider that based on the capacity is there, that is, the capacity is expended or the capacity is filled, we can design the collection frequency accordingly. Finally comes the tertiary collection system. So as you understand, we have been talking about transfer stations. So tertiary collection systems refers to transfer of waste from this transfer stations to the final disposal site or the waste processing, certain kind of waste processing centers. Now, usually the rule is when the distance between secondary storage and disposal sites or waste processing and treatment facilities is more than 15 km, then transfer stations are provided. But there may be other criteria as well, but for the time being, we can consider that distance is the only criteria that is being considered. Now, talking about collection, when we are talking about primary collection, usually this involves collecting waste in two ways. You can say that means the waste is collected from door, and as per MSW rules, waste has to be collected from door to door, or for certain kinds of larger complexes and all, at least from the gate of the complex, right? So that's the basic rule. Now usually this involves a neighborhood or a locality or a particular ward. So that means there are certain areas in the locality which has got wide roads, certain areas which are very small roads. So all this needs to be considered when I choose what kind of vehicle we should employ for collecting this waste. There are other considerations as well that we will learn later. So waste usually for primary collection could be collected by both non-motorized vehicles or motorized vehicles. Non-motorized vehicles, as you understand, is something like a push cart, as you can see over here. That means it's a cart which is being pushed by some human beings, and then you can actually take it to in very small roads and so on, right? So why will I choose a push cart? Why not a motorized vehicle such as this small LCV that you can see over here? So why between this? So how do I make these choices? This we will learn later on. For the time being, we say that both these systems could be employed. Now, that means this is the waste that is being generated at our households. From there, I can either transport the waste via push carts, or I can collect the waste via push carts or via this LCVs. Now, after the collection is done, then the waste needs to be transported. Transported to where? It is usually transported to the non-motorized vehicles are suitable for transfer to waste storage depot or secondary storage. So that means usually a secondary storage depot is as you can see that we have kept a metal container over here, and this is located at certain locations in that collection zone, and the waste collection vehicle, this particular push cart or the waste collectors can take the push cart to this particular bin and they can unload the waste. Or in case of LCV, use of LCV, the same can happen as we have seen earlier. LCVs can also may have some tipping gear. They usually come and align themselves with this particular bin and they directly empty their waste into this particular bin. But because these are LCVs, that means they have got, they can drive for a longer distance, unlike a hand cart which cannot be pushed for a long distance. So, if required, motorized vehicles can directly transfer waste to transfer station, disposal sites, waste processing center instead of secondary storage. So, they can take it to a secondary storage, or from here directly they can send it to the transfer station, or if required, if the city is small, they can even go to directly to the landfill site or to the processing plants or the waste process treatment centers. Now, once the waste reaches the secondary storage, then starts the secondary collection. So, usually this involves larger capacity vehicles. Of course, it should be bigger than a wheelbarrow and bigger than a small LCV because this involves a larger container. So, we used other kinds of vehicles, and as you can see that this is one sort of a skip loader that you can see over here. That means this system actually lifts the container, this metal container from over here and loads over itself and then and this vehicle can then move directly to the landfill site or the processing center or to a transfer station in case the distance to this landfill site is too much. Now, why this small vehicle is suitable? Because in that case, again, this is still a part of the city. That means this this secondary storage is within the neighborhood itself. We cannot take in very large lorries usually, and also in urban roads we cannot take very large lorries inside the urban area. There are a lot of restrictions in terms of movements of larger vehicles during different times of the day. So usually we end up using intermediate size vehicles such as you can see in this particular picture. So usually these vehicles transfer the waste from secondary storage or tertiary collection points to the waste processing or disposal sites. So that means sometimes what happens, these kinds of containers, metal containers are placed at these secondary storage points where all these wheelbarrows bring their waste or these LCVs bring their waste. Sometimes in case of waste which is generated by a market, or waste which is generated by like C&D waste, which is usually of a larger quantity. In that case, we can place these containers at several parts of the city, or like community bins. Those are spread over separate parts of the city, and directly this vehicle goes to those particular points, loads this particular waste, this particular container into it, and then transfer it directly to the transfer station or the processing plant. So that can also happen. So the choice of vehicle, what sort of vehicle we will choose, depends on the quantity of waste that is being transported. It depends on the travel distance, that how far away I should transfer the waste. So if it's too far away, then I will choose a vehicle accordingly. But if it is very, very far away, then I have to transfer it to a transfer station and so on. Then road widths, if the road width doesn't allows me to choose a certain kind of vehicle, I can't. Road conditions, maintenance facilities of that particular vehicle. For example, I buy a very expensive vehicle belonging to a very expensive brand, but there is no maintenance facilities for that brand over in this particular city. So there is no point of buying that particular vehicle. So all these decisions comes into play when you choose what sort of vehicle has to be bought for this kind of waste transportation. So as we can see from secondary storage, we use this kind of a vehicle, and this vehicle can transport the waste to a transfer station or to the processing plant directly. And finally, from the transfer station, we use larger size vehicles. As you can see over here, this is also a compactor truck which is being utilized, but this is a much larger size, and using this kind of a truck we can actually send the waste to a processing plant or disposal site or the landfill site. So that is how the overall system works. Now, talking about the collection system, as we were discussing, like in certain cases where door-to-door collection is not possible, we have to set up community bins from where we have to collect waste. Or in some cities earlier, before these rules came in, there were community bins all over Indian cities, and it was the job of the municipal body to send vehicles to each of these bins to transport the waste. So this system exists in many parts of the world still, and as we are discussing, along with this door-to-door collection system, parallelly the community bin collection system also exists. Because in many parts of the city, we have to provide community bins, and sometimes we give community bins as a secondary option, even though those, if we can manage it in a proper way, then the secondary storage facilities also have community bins permanently placed, and some people can directly bring their waste to this particular bins as well. So community storage and collection system is there, but in this kind of system, there are some positives and some negatives. The generator needs to travel a certain distance to dispose waste, and as we understand that people are unwilling to walk more than 150 to 200 meters, roughly that's the range. After that, if the bin is too far away, people will not carry the garbage, they will just throw it into the municipal drain, right? So that we cannot, place bins at too far distances. If we don't, of course, this we are talking about if we don't have a door-to-door collection system. The street cleaning service is responsible for collection and prevention of littering. Now, as soon as the community bin system is utilized, the community bin is placed in the street, and that means the street cleaning service becomes responsible for this particular bin and the littering around it. So that means the responsibility goes from the generator to the street collection service. In the door-to-door collection system, what happens? The generator is responsible for storing the waste properly and then transferring it to the transport vehicle. But here, it is the responsibility of the street cleaning service to manage that particular bin. Then, willingness of the generator to walk a certain distance, of course, that plays a big role. Masonry enclosures, sometimes, as we have learnt earlier, that this kind of bins could be metal containers, masonry enclosures, concrete bins, and so on. So this has evolved over time. Now we prefer metal containers because those could be directly loaded into the vehicles. But earlier we used to have masonry enclosures. Concrete bins is still used in many areas, and these are inefficient because it's difficult to remove. You have to remove everything manually. And that means that the vehicle has to come and wait over there, and then physically some people have to load the garbage into the particular vehicle. So that it's not only it's unhygienic and unsight, aesthetically looks bad, but it's also involves a lot of time. So time means you will spend a lot of cost. The vehicle could have been, the primary use of the vehicle is to transport waste, right? So that means the more time it spends in transportation, it is more effectively utilized. The more time it stands at a particular location, its utilization rate drops. So that you have to understand while you design what kind of system you are going to put in an urban area. Then coming to curbside collection, this is a system which we see in some cities, and sometimes usually we see it in developed countries. The generator sets the waste container outside and retrieves it later. So that means the waste generator usually put the container outside into the street in the morning, and then the vehicle comes in, uses this kind of an arm to lift the waste over the vehicle, empties the container, and then again puts back the container, and the container is again taken back by the generator inside. So of course the containers needs to be standard, otherwise automatic lifting operation cannot happen. So that means this has to be of certain dimensions, certain sizes. Only then this kind of operation can be happen. But you have to understand this kind of system requires, this is possible when, that means that transportation is more. That means this large vehicle is coming from door to door and picking up your garbage and then going. So of course the vehicle size can be small or large, but at the end of the day what it means, you have to travel a larger distance. So in case the density is very low and also that area is relatively affluent, that is the case when we will go for a curbside collection system. Otherwise, in Indian conditions, we usually don't see this kind of system because neither our areas are, low density, neither, our population is that much affluent. So that's why curbside collection could be an option, but only for very small or only for very specific areas. Then in Indian condition, usually we see two variants, that is block collection or door-to-door collection. Now, what is block collection? In this case, the generator delivers the waste to the vehicle at the time of collection and have to walk to the collection point. And collection needs to be frequent. That means every day, at least the vehicle should come once and then it should collect. Otherwise, what happens? The generator will have to store the waste inside their home, and that will lead to the decomposition happening in the home, that will result in a lot of vermins, lot of rodents and so on. So usually every day waste needs to be collected. But the more important thing is the people have to come out of the waste from their house. They have to walk a little bit, come to the collection point, which is marked even on the road, and then they stand there. The vehicle comes at a certain point of time, they picks up the waste and then they go. And in door-to-door collection, waste is collected from each generator or each premise. Now, in Indian system, door-to-door collection in India is actually a mix of both these systems. It's neither a block collection system, neither a door-to-door collection system. Usually we see what happens, the waste collector comes to your area, more or less he comes at a certain time, he will blow the whistle, or he will blow the whistle in the sense he doesn't climbs up the stairs in your house. Sometimes he does climbs up your stairs and comes to your door to collect the waste. Sometimes they just don't remain outside, and then they will blow the whistle, and hearing the whistle you can come outside and you can put the waste inside that particular vehicle. So in some places, door to door collection in India is actually a block collection. In some places, door-to-door collection really happens. That means the collector comes to every house and then takes away the waste. So we can say both block collection and door-to-door collection, or a mix of this, happens in Indian conditions. Now, we will talk about certain waste collection criteria. So these are basic, rules, or these are basic, steps that we have to follow when we design a waste collection service. So the first thing that we have to think about is to synchronize primary and secondary waste collection and transportation system. That means if I don't synchronize these two, that means we keep on, the primary system works independently and the secondary system works independently. That cannot happen. If that happens, then what happens? The waste bins will overflow. There would be some cases when the waste collection happens at a different frequency, doesn't consider the amount of waste that is being generated. So there is no, it's no coordination between these two systems, and that leads to littering, that leads to overflow of waste bins, and it leads to other problems as well. So that means the best possible system is, we will discuss that later, that is, the secondary vehicle comes, the primary vehicle comes, the handcart comes or this LCV comes, directly empties the waste into the container, and this container is immediately lifted, as soon as it gets filled, immediately lifted by a vehicle is waiting for that, and it's taken to the final disposal center or the processing center, disposal site or the processing center. Now, that is the best possible system, but this requires a lot of coordination. That means a lot of operation logistics has to be planned, so that the exact timings has to be matched, right? But that's why synchronization is important, but it doesn't happen every time. So it may happen that the waste is collected in the morning from the neighborhood, it's brought to the center, in the afternoon maybe the vehicle comes and takes this waste away. So that means the entire day's waste has to be stored for certain amount of time, that needs to be transported. So we need to decide on what is the appropriate size of this secondary collection vehicle, so it will be able to transport all this waste. Or if it is more than one container, that means we may have to bring multiple vehicles, or we have to plan the route, the schedule of the secondary collection vehicle, so that it comes twice and takes up this container in 2 trips. So all this planning needs to be done. Compatibility between storage bins, associated equipment and transport vehicles. obviously it has to be compatible. Why? Because the systems, we are trying to make everything very, very mechanical. That means we are trying to reduce the human involvement. So the vehicles, the push carts come in, they directly unloads into the metal container. So the system has to be such that it could do that. So that means the height of the opening of the metal container, or where the secondary storage, and the height and the way the tilting mechanism of that particular handcart operates, it has to be at certain height so that we can directly transfer. If it is not, then what happens? First it gets unloaded into the ground, then using some system we can actually lift it and then put it back into the container. So it increases time, it increases inconvenience, it increases manpower requirement, and so on. So all this different, and the same goes like the metal container has to be directly lifted into the vehicle which you transport it, or if this is a community bin, or if it is some sort of a storage system and it needs to be emptied into some vehicle, a compactor vehicle maybe. In that case, directly we have to lift this waste, this particular container, and lift the waste into that particular vehicle. So in that case also, there has to be some standard sizes, some standard lifting mechanisms, as we have discussed earlier, right? So this compatibility has to be there. And then segregated waste transport is either in same vehicle or in different vehicles. So either the transport vehicle should have that segregated compartments, or we have to bring in different vehicles, or sometimes two push carts or two storage vehicles can come, each taking different kinds of waste. Vehicles used for transfer should be covered to avoid spillage on road, and similarly leachate coming out from the waste, or the moisture that comes out of that waste while it is being transported, that should be avoided. So these are some of the primary concerns that we should be careful about. Now, each step, primary collection, secondary collection, tertiary collection, each step involves certain manpower requirement, certain equipment requirement, and of course some time requirement. And because we are using different equipment, different vehicles, the cost also is different. So we have to consider all these different factors when we compare between different systems, right? The other part is, what are the things involved in a collection system, both for primary collection as well as for secondary collection? That is the travel to and from the collection area. Both primary vehicles need to travel to the collection area and bring back the waste. Same goes for the secondary vehicles as well. Now, travel to and from. So that means to and from. That means there is a travel time involved, there is a distance involved. So as accordingly, we have to decide how many vehicles are required, how many trips would be planned, what is the cost that we will spend. Then the collection system, it involves, like in case of primary collection, the vehicle comes in front of your door or it comes near your house, and you have to put the garbage inside. That takes certain amount of time. So, or in case of secondary collection system, the loading unloading part, that is the transfer or lifting of waste, transfer of the waste from storage to collection vehicles, that also needs to be considered. So this requires some amount of time, some amount of manpower. Then for travel between successive collection points, that means from one point, that is from one door to the next door, or from one group of buildings to the next group of buildings, or from one secondary storage to the next secondary storage, there is travel between successive collection points, or one community bin to another community bin the vehicle has to travel. So depending on the distance of this, we have to decide on what sort of vehicles are suitable. Because if the distance is long, it's better to use motorized vehicles. But if the distance is short, if you use motorized vehicles, then probably the vehicle clutch, the vehicle systems will deteriorate fast. So these are some of the considerations. And then also it requires time to travel between the, these particular points. Then finally delivery, that is transfer of the contents of the vehicle to the processing or disposal site, or to the secondary storage as well. In case of primary collection, the vehicle unloads to secondary storage. In case of secondary collection, the vehicle unloads to the processing or disposal site. That also requires some time. So when I plan the entire operations, travel time, loading unloading time, travel between the collection points time, travel for time taken by the generator to put the garbage inside the vehicle, or from primary collection vehicle to the secondary storage. So all this involves time. So that has to be estimated. Now, finally, to ensure proper composting and recycling in urban areas, the normal waste stream, the waste that is collected from different generators, in addition to that, we have to consider street sweeping waste as well as silt from drains. So, street sweeping waste includes a lot of toxic substances like heavy metals and should not be mixed with residential waste streams. So, there has to be a separate collection system for this. Similarly, silt for drains include pathogens and should also be handled separately, because we cannot mix this waste into the normal composting and the recycling stream. Then it would contaminate the entire, fertilizers that would be produced. So, that is why we have to have separate collection systems for this particular kinds of waste. So, overall, as we can understand, the waste collection and transportation contributes significantly to the cost of municipal solid waste management services. So, actually this is the most costliest part of the system, and system design is as per waste generators, waste quantities and waste compositions, which we have learned. So, we have to consider this to design the system, and we have to optimize the collection and transfer operations. So, there has to be synchronizations between primary, secondary, tertiary collection, and we have to overall optimize the system. So, when we optimize the system, it has to be optimized for a chosen frequency of collection. As per the kinds of waste composition, what kind of waste is generated, we have to choose what sort should be the frequency of collection. The choice of the collection vehicles, what sort of vehicles we should collect, depends on what sort of terrain, what sort of the city's characteristics, what sort of waste segregation policies. Choice of vehicle design, the segregation policies determine how many compartments should be there in the vehicle and so on. So, this is vehicle design. Choice of routes, which routes the vehicle should take. So, these are some of the things we have to determine in waste collection operations. Then the other is, we have to also ensure in other aspects, that is, there are different workers engaged in this collection system, and actually most of the people engaged by the ULB or by contractors are in this particular collection and transportation system. So, equitable distribution of workload amongst the employees. So, that has to be thought of. So, that means that when I am designing the system, that means we should also talk about the workload or the productivity of the employees as well as that of the vehicles. Vehicle utilization, if possible, human beings can work for 8-hour shifts maybe, but for vehicles it could work for the entire day. So, maybe 2 shifts for vehicle, and that will reduce fleet size and increase vehicle productivity. Transportation and collection of waste at night in congested areas in large cities, waste collection could be done at night as well, and a solution should be as per the local context. Now, here we have just discussed about the advantages and disadvantages of community bin collection and door-to-door collection system. We have more or less discussed this already. So, community bin collection is of course less costly. It's available 24 hours and it's very convenient for the households. Whereas problems are illegal, if it is a little bit far away, then people just throw it garbage away. It's illegal waste, it results in illegal waste disposal. Sometimes there is a lot of resistance, like people don't want the community bin near their house. So, not in my backyard, NIMBY. So, that kind of protest always happen. In case of door-to-door collection, segregation of waste happens. That is beneficial. In community bin collection, usually segregation doesn't happen. We can put different kinds of containers, but usually that doesn't happen. Prevention of littering in case of D2D collection, reduction of community bins in an area. That, as we discussed, some community bins still remains. So, but it increases chance of animal and vermin infestation inside houses. The collection time is fixed. So, that means you may mix on the collection on a particular day and then you have to store that waste, and also it increases cost. So, these are the positives and the negatives of both these systems, and accordingly our city in India, we will try, as per rules we have to do door-to-door collection, but we have to also do community bin collection in certain places. Then coming to management information system for waste collection and transportation. So, this is where the IT systems comes in, or as you know, that geographic information system, global positioning system, GPS, radio frequency identification, general GPRS systems. So, GPRS is for transferring the data, right, between the point of data generation and the servers and so on. Whereas RFID is a radio tag, that means you can identify that when you come to a house, there are some cities which this has implemented, the worker needs to scan the RFID tag attached to that house. So that gives a confirmation that waste collection has happened in that particular house. So the authorities can also keep tag on if the waste collection is happening properly. Or similarly, when containers are transported from one area to another, the container may have this RFID tag which help us to track the movement of the container and also return it to the location where it should go back to. So all these systems can be facilitated by using RFID technology. And GPS is the location of vehicles and all, if they are following the particular route and all, that could be determined. And GIS is overall data management to store both spatial data as well as non-spatial data together in the same format so that we can make better decisions. So usually this kind of systems are employed to for day-to-day performance monitoring, daily report generation. This could be report about allotment of sanitary workers to different tasks, which is scheduling of activities to different workers, and also substitution in case somebody is absent, we have to substitute somebody. So this could be done. This requires a complex, allocation system, which is better to be handled by a computer. Daily reporting of workers, supervisors, drivers, so we can keep track of who is coming and who is not. Vehicle inventory status, quantity of waste transported, treated, disposed. So we can keep all these records which will help us to plan future operations, make payments to contract workers based on the work they have done, monitoring operations by self-help groups, NGOs and private contractors by the urban body. So all this is facilitated by incorporating this kind of smart IT systems. So of course, a lot of data is required, and that requires not only data but the data management system. Usually GIS software is utilized to maintain and manage this data and even plan vehicular routes and to track waste transportation vehicles. So we will give you examples of this. Now this is charts given by CPHEO, and also I have augmented it a bit. So this actually shows the different waste streams that are there in an urban area and what kind of waste collection, transportation and final disposal is undertaken. For example, green refers to over here as primary collection, blue the secondary collection part, this gray is transfer station and the processing part, and finally the disposal is in this magenta. So the first waste stream is the primary segregated waste collection that happens at doorstep. So this is the first waste stream. So door-to-door collection, usually we can go for hand carts with 6 to 8 bins, or directly through small covered mechanized vehicles having partition for collection of organic and inorganic waste. So both LCVs or push carts could be utilized. So this waste is brought to the secondary storage, where it is stored in biodegradable and non-biodegradable separate containers, separate bins. From here, the waste could be directly transported to the processing facility using compactors, hook loaders, dumper placers. We will learn about this kind of vehicles in the next lecture. Then also to secondary, this could be transported to a secondary collection vehicle, which should take it to a tertiary or to a transfer station if the final disposal site is far away, particularly 15 kilometers away. Again, from here, the waste is divided into two parts, biodegradable and non-biodegradable. Biodegradable goes to first goes to sorting centers and compaction could be done, and then it could be taken to some composting plant or to vermicomposting plants or to a biogas plant, because these are biodegradable waste. The non-biodegradable waste goes to a material recovery facility from where certain materials could be taken out and recycled. Then it also is compacted, and finally it is taken to the recycle. The material which is generated some is taken to the recycle market, some goes to this waste to energy plants, some to refuse derived fuel. So that means we can use them as fuel as well. So this is where the final waste can go, and finally the rejects from all these centers and inert waste goes into the waste to this landfill site. So this is how the waste travels in an urban area. For C&D waste, the construction and demolition waste, usually it is stored in large bins in place of generation, and then using primary collection, or it could be a mix of primary or secondary collection. The waste could be directly taken to the landfill site or to a material recovery facility from where certain materials could be recovered, and finally the rejects of the material recovery facility also goes to the landfill site. Similarly, for garden waste or yard waste, which is for most of it has to be used locally, that is the mandate. The rest is stored in large bins. Again, primary collection vehicles, come in, they can take it to a composting plant, and from there the rejects could go to the landfill site, or if the waste is not, there is no composting plant or there is no possibility of composting this kind of waste, then we can directly take it to the landfill site. Then coming to collection of waste from streets, again this waste could be biodegradable and non-biodegradable. Biodegradable waste could be stored in green bins, non-biodegradable in white bins, and some amount of non-biodegradable waste could be directly transported via these secondary collection vehicles. Instead of first storing it and then loading it via skip loader into a vehicle, we can directly, the vehicle can, you can put the garbage into the vehicle directly, and then it goes into the landfill site. Whereas for biodegradable waste can go to a processing site like a composting plant, and then from there the rejects can go to the landfill site. For drainage cleaning, these are black bins because these are sort of hazardous waste, and again we can use directly vehicles and then take it to the landfill site. These bins could be loaded via skip loader and taken to the landfill site. Waste from vegetable market, either it could be biodegradable, some could be non-biodegradable, and the other waste is all mixed waste and hazardous waste maybe as well. Again, as per MSW rules, we use green, white and black bins, and using different kinds of vehicles like dumper placers, compactors, hook loaders, we will learn about this. We will lift these particular bins and take them either to the composting plant in case of biodegradable, to the RDF or WTE plant, waste to energy or refuse derived fuel plant from the the non-recyclable waste, non-biodegradable waste, and then the other waste can directly go to the landfill site. So the rejects from these plants goes to the landfill site, and the other mixed waste or hazardous waste goes directly to the landfill site. Similarly, for bulk generators, there could be again bulk biodegradable and non-biodegradable. We follow similar processes and eventually the waste reaches to the landfill site. So these are some suggestions given by CPHEO. Of course, as per each city, this will vary. As per the waste composition, as per the system that you are designing, this will vary. But this gives you an overall idea about how different kinds of waste stream needs to be treated in an urban area. So these are some of the references you can study. To conclude, primary, secondary and tertiary collection is the most cost-intensive part of municipal solid waste management. Collection systems have to be designed and optimized as per the different waste streams and disposal and treatment strategies adopted by the ULB. And finally, all the stages of the collection system has to be compatible with each other and synchronized to reduce cost and inconvenience of the common people. Thank you.